Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan does like knowing animals. Dr. Siobhan O'Sullivan does like knowing animals.
Hey people, welcome to Knowing Animals. My name's Siobhan O'Sullivan and I do like knowing animals. Well, this episode of Knowing Animals is from our Protecting Animals series, where we talk to animal advocates past and present about the work they do for animals. Now, this episode is brought to you by ASA. ASA is the Australasian Animal Studies Association. You know about ASA because I talk about them every single week on the podcast. ASA has a website, it has a Facebook group, it works very hard to support animal studies scholars. One of the ways in which it does that is by organising a conference every 2 years. The conference will be happening this year, 2019, in New Zealand. It's going to be just wonderful. So I really encourage you very strongly to think about coming to the conference and also liking ASA on Facebook. That way you can stay up to date about all the happenings in the world of animal studies. Okay, well that's enough of that. Let's get down to business. This week's episode is coming to you from the University of Sydney, where I'm attending an absolutely fantastic conference called New Directions in Animal Advocacy. It's organised by HAN, which is the Human Animal Research Network at the University of Sydney. And I'm very, very pleased to be able to bring you interviews from animal advocates who have also come to the conference to learn about animal issues and to think about the intersection between animal advocates and academia. So this week, I'm very lucky to be joined by Michael Dello-Iacovo. How did I go?
That's good.
Not too bad. Yeah. Michael is a PhD candidate actually at UNSW, which is my institution. But more importantly, he's also a candidate standing for the Animal Justice Party. He's running in the seat of Heffron, which is in the areas where UNSW is situated, and he's running for the upcoming New South Wales state election. So welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Thank you, Siobhan. Great to be here.
Okay, Michael, why did you get involved in animal protection?
Yeah, so it is a little bit of a long story. I have to say I did grow up with pets, but when I think about it, I never really gave any attention at all to any animals beyond my pets, let alone, not even animals of the same species. I had cats and a dog. It wasn't until I started my university degree when I was 17 and met someone who became my best friend and was actually the first vegan that I had ever met. And I didn't know what a vegan was at the time. I was vaguely aware of vegetarianism. I asked him a lot of questions. And he, after 2 long years of asking lots and lots of questions, he eventually convinced me to try vegetarianism. I had sort of gone through a whole life renewal, so to speak, and I had a new purpose. I wanted to really do something about this whole climate change thing I'd heard about. Mostly interested in how that was going to affect humans at the time. So I became vegetarian and read more, and eventually I read the United Nations report, Livestock's Long Shadow, and was so convinced and was just blown away that no one else seemed to be talking about this. I did climate change as an elective in my undergraduate. And I talked about the impact of animal agriculture on climate change, and no one wanted to talk about it, and not even my professor, and I was blown away. But over the course of the following 2 years from becoming vegetarian, I became a little bit more exposed to the other side of animal agriculture, which is, of course, the impacts on the animals. And it's just not something I'd really given any thought to at all, as I'm sure a lot of people are the same. And so once I guess had seen enough footage, I kind of just decided I can't contribute to this anymore. And I became vegan, so 2 years after becoming vegetarian. This is about 4 years ago. And then since then I've gotten more involved in animal advocacy, activism, and talking about this as much as I can.
Wonderful. So Michael, your way of engaging in animal activism probably incorporates a whole lot of different things, but one of the ways in particular you're trying to generate change is via the political route. Mm-hmm. So the Animal Justice Party is Australia's first party particularly dedicated to animal issues. Why politics? Why do it this way?
Yeah, I've always been interested in politics, and I think what got me particularly interested and excited recently was seeing what the Dutch Party for the Animals has been able to do, and they've been very successful. They now have 5 members elected at the national level in their lower house, and I think 2 in their upper house. And seeing the changes they've been able to make for animals has really quite impressed me. I guess I always understood the value of politics, but was worried that it relied too much on public perception to drive the change, and that if there wasn't the public support for pro-animal reform, then that just wouldn't be able to get through in Parliament. But I think from what we've seen with the Dutch Party for the Animals in the Netherlands is that despite there being not really any higher proportion of vegans or vegetarians in the country, they've still managed to get a lot of changes through for animals. And so I found out about the Animal Justice Party 2 years ago, and I was excited because it was the first party where I believed in just about everything that they stood for. And so I figured I might as well help them, and I became more and more involved, and then I got excited enough that I decided to run for the state election next year.
So, Michael, are you going to win the seat, do you think?
So I'm up against a very safe Labor. It's a very safe Labor seat, and I'm up against a very well-respected Labor member, the Honourable Ron Honig. So, look, I'm going to give it my best shot. I think it's unlikely that I will win, but my goal is more so to, I guess, influence the conversation in the lead up to the election, and to, the more primary votes that we get, the more that we show whoever wins the seat that people in that area actually do care a lot about animal issues, and that can and has changed policy in the past. And I guess to raise awareness of issues that relate to animals, the environment, to the people in the local area. And so I think from a combination of those two things, we can I can still have a lot of impact, even if I don't get elected.
So, Michael, you're a young man, and you're a student, and you're not sat in Parliament yet, although we're hopeful that one day you will. How are the other candidates treating you? What has their response been to you being involved in campaigning and launching your campaign and all the rest of it?
Do you mean other candidates of other political parties?
Yes. Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah. Other candidates for other political parties.
Sure. So my interaction since becoming a candidate has been a little limited. I did meet. I guess I won't say their name, but one of the candidates for the Labor Party for the state election. And I had a chat with her about the issues that I thought were important, and I asked them about their animal and environment policies. I did get an interesting, not from the candidate, but from one of their volunteers actually, saying when she found out I was from the Animal Justice Party, she said, "Do we need an Animal Justice Party? Because doesn't everyone care about animals?" And that kind of shocked me into silence for a little bit, and I had to tell her about all the horrible things that still happen to animals. But I think this is what gives me a little bit of hope, because we do see ourselves as a nation of animal lovers, and I guess just the policies and actions don't reflect that yet. But that does give me hope that we can have a lot of impact there, because the public support is already there in the US. And I imagine it will be the same in Australia. I haven't seen the Australian statistics, but in the US, much higher than 50% of the population actually thinks that slaughterhouses should be banned. Maybe they don't quite know what they mean, because most people do consume animal products from slaughterhouses in the US, but that support is there, and I think we can tap into that.
So we're recording this interview ahead of the state election, but when people hear it, it'll be really just the eve of the state election. Can you say something about the ways in which you've gone about your campaigning and tried to engage the community and the kinds of responses you've had?
Yeah, sure. So I have to admit, at the time of recording this, I'm only just getting started on my campaign. I've only announced my candidacy a few weeks ago, but the sorts of things that I will be doing include I'd like to get into my community as much as possible. I want to start knocking on doors, meeting people and talking to them about the issues that they find important. and talking to them about the issues that I find important, and hopefully we can find some common ground. We do have we have stalls at different things like vegan and food markets that we get a lot of support from, because a lot of people there already agree with a lot of what we believe. Also, I've been involved in starting up a youth wing for the Animal Justice Party, and actually at the time of recording our launch is tonight, which is very exciting. But through that, I'm hoping that we can get a lot of support from young people who I think are more likely to care about animal issues, more likely to care about the environment. And so historically, our party hasn't had a lot of engagement with young people, but I think this is an area where we can really tap into to get a lot of support, because young people are on board with climate change. They get it, as we saw from the protests just recently with students going to Parliament houses across the country. Young people are frustrated and they want change, and they're taking it into their own hands.
Do you shy away from telling voters in your electorate that you're vegan? Do you find that is alienating, or are you proud to be vegan, or how do you deal with that issue?
Yeah, I don't shy away from it. I'm very, very proud to be vegan, and I do talk about it where possible. I think there's just so much of it that people really should agree with. There's not only the animal suffering, animal cruelty and exploitation, but also the health benefits, the environmental benefits. So no, I don't shy away from it. And I also don't really shy away from telling people to try it, or to consider it, or to be vegan, and to say that I think it's important. I guess sometimes it's not my first word that I go for. It really depends on who I'm speaking to, and I try and pick my audience. But no, that's an important part of who I am, and I definitely wouldn't shy away from that.
What about sharing graphic images or graphic details of some of the ways in which we harm animals in ways that might be less known or socially invisible? What's your attitude towards that as a campaign tool?
I'm not sure about a campaign tool. I will say that I do participate in the Anonymous for the Voiceless Cube of Truth outreach, where we show footage of animal farming practices in Australia to the public. And I have to say, before I started doing that a few years ago, I did worry a little bit about the public perception of that and whether that might be harmful. But since doing that, just seeing the reactions of so many people who they're shocked, and often they're thankful that we are showing that. Even if they, we talk to them and they don't, they say, "Oh, look, I can't go vegan," but they're still thankful. They're like, "Thank you for showing the truth. Thank you for putting this out there." And so I don't think it's. Again, I'm not sure how much I will be using this in my campaign, but I don't think it is something to necessarily shy away from, because often people are thankful. And if I look back, and this might be playing into a similar mind fallacy a little bit, but myself and for many other vegans, when we think about ourselves before we were vegan, we want someone to have shown us earlier the truth. And so I guess keeping that in mind and seeing how thankful people are, then I don't think there's anything wrong with using that where appropriate.
Now, politics is a notoriously difficult game, and it's not just difficult, for those who sit in Parliament and have to deal with people from the other side of the political divide. It's also hard work just being a member of a political party. How are you managing that? From your perspective, how's the Animal Justice Party going with its interpersonal relations and all that kind of thing?
It's a good question. So I was never really involved with any other political party before, so I don't have a lot to compare it to. But I have to say I've been quite pleasantly surprised, I guess, because I had the same reservations about politics and politicians before getting involved. But I think the fact that we have, it's in some ways it's more of a movement than a political party, in that we all have this common drive, vision and goal. And I've also seen this in the way that the Dutch Party for Animals has helped us and other political parties, animal-focused political parties around the world, to help our common goals, because that we all want the same thing. And so more than I've ever really been aware of with any other political party or type of political party around the world, we've got this kind of common world movement around political parties for the animals. So the chair of the Dutch Party for the Animals Youth Wing, Sebastian Wolfswinkel, has come to Australia. He gave up a month of his time to help us start our own youth wing, and he's been immensely helpful. And he did that for no benefit of his own, other than this is just a common goal that we share. And so I think,
was it summer here and winter there when he did this?
I think it was the other way around. It was winter here. Yeah, this is a few months ago. Or autumn. Sorry, spring maybe. Yeah.
Oh well, good on him. Well, Michael, let's imagine that the results are in, and you've been elected to state parliament. Understanding what the purview of the state parliament is, the kind of powers state parliament has, etc., etc. What's the first thing that you would try and do for animals if you were in a position to start making political change?
I think one of the first things I would do, look, I would want to spend a lot of time understanding the system as much as I possibly could, seeing exactly what the status quo is. And I've seen a lot of that from outside of politics, outside of parliament. But I wouldn't want to be too presumptuous and get in and just start immediately making big changes. I want to do the research, look at maybe some investigative inquiries into what the issues are and how we can improve them. But I think one area that I'm quite interested in looking at is how we can encourage plant-based eating or veganism, however you want to frame it, in schools, our hospitals, as much as that can be done through the state level. But I've seen some great work being done in Brooklyn, where the president of the Brooklyn borough, and I'm afraid I've forgotten their name, but they've managed to get Meatless Mondays into hospitals and more vegan options at schools and education programs. And I think that sort of thing is something that, because we, as well as looking at what's effective, we also have to look at what changes are likely to get through. I would like to see an end to slaughterhouses. I'm not going to hide that or to shy away from it, but I do think that's not going to get voted in anytime soon by the rest of Parliament. And so what we can do is look at some things that would be still very beneficial to animals, to people, and to the environment, and to get those kind of smaller incremental changes through, and eventually move towards the ultimate goals.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, I ask everyone who comes on Knowing Animals to answer 5 quick questions. Are you ready for your 5 quick questions?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Can you recall when you first started to think that there was something wrong or problematic about the human-non-human animal relationship?
I would have to say it was sometime shortly after me becoming vegetarian, which is a lot later in my life than I would like to admit. But I just never thought about it until I started becoming... I mentioned my best friend was vegan, and then through hanging out with him, I also met a lot of other vegans, and so this just became a normal part of, we talked about this a lot, and I was around conversations about this, and I just started to, the more I thought and heard about it, the more I was just blown away that no one talks about this, and we never think about it, but just how fundamentally wrong and strange it is that we exploit other animals for our pleasure, whilst we complain are upset about discrimination in every other context, and then we just ignore this entire other context of discrimination.
Great. So, can you recall the first thing you did to try and bring about change for animals?
Yeah, I guess it would have to be, unless you count me becoming vegetarian, but I think initially that wasn't for animals, but I suppose, so I was involved with a lot of climate change activism in South Australia, where I was prior to being in Sydney. So in particular, I took Al Gore's climate reality training. And so I tried to get animal agriculture in the discussion there. And let me tell you, it was hard, as you might imagine, to my frustration, but I tried my best to get environmentalists talking about animal agriculture and trying to get them to look at that as as an issue. And this is at the time that I was becoming convinced about the animal issues, but I didn't use that framing. I mostly used the environmental framing because that's the language that they were speaking. And so as much as I could, I tried to get that into the conversation, into their minds.
Wonderful. Michael, if you had to name one animal advocate who's had a big impact on you, who would it be? I
think it would either be my best friend, Miles Taryn, who convinced me to become vegetarian, eventually vegan, and an activist. But then maybe equally first with him would be Peter Singer, who influenced me very greatly. I first discovered him about 4 years ago via his TED Talk about effective altruism. And this is just at the same time that I was becoming vegan. And as well as I read Animal Liberation, and as well as that influencing me a lot, also his writings about effective advocacy have kind of driven a lot about what I have done since then. And so where possible, I try and combine effective altruism and animal advocacy to look at how I can make as much difference as possible in my life for animals. And, well, I include humans in that because we are animals. So how can I make the most difference for all sentient life? And if I didn't discover Peter Singer's TED Talk, I don't think I'd be where I am today. So
it's another one for Peter Singer then. We'll add that to the list. So what's the most important thing animal advocates can do for our animals?
I think to be open-minded and to accept that we don't know everything and that we should never assume that what we are doing today is what is best for animals. I try and remind myself of this all the time. Is there a chance that what I am doing is not actually the best thing for animals that I could be doing personally with my personal fit, my experience, and so on? And so it's a tough balance because you don't want to all the time be doubting yourself about what you're doing. But I think we should be in the habit of occasionally reviewing looking at ourselves and what we are doing and thinking, can we be doing this better? Can we be doing something else maybe that's better for animals?
Wonderful. Well, if you had the power to change one thing about the human-non-human animal relationship, what would it be?
I thought about this question when you sent it to me yesterday, and I'm still not satisfied with my answer, but I'll give it to you anyway. So I did initially think if we could just have more visibility and more contact with animals, especially the animals that we tend to exploit for food and for other purposes. I was lucky enough to visit the Where Pigs Fly sanctuary on the weekend, and I, for the first time ever, met a pig. And I just, in that moment, I thought, how could anyone meet this wonderful pig and then still eat pigs? The only reason I guess feel a little bit pessimistic about that is, and actually I sort of formed this view yesterday. There was a great talk about how we recreational fishing, I guess, and fish suffering is right there in front of us. I grew up fishing. It was a part of my family tradition, and yet I never developed any kind of feelings towards fish. I never thought about that. Maybe it's a little bit different because they are further removed from us, but that's the only reason I hesitate from saying that getting more contact with animals would help us. I think it would help us, but it wouldn't solve the problem as much as we might like it to.
Fascinating. Well, Michael, so the election is coming up very soon. What are you working on next? Yeah, so
I guess the youth wing, which we just started, but I'm very keen to help to grow that and to get that in more universities and eventually to maybe into schools. So at the moment we've launched the state, New South Wales State Youth Wing. But we're also looking to roll that out nationally as well in the new year. And then I guess trying to finish my PhD thesis, which I'm still working on. So I'm about halfway through my PhD at the moment. And then I'm hoping to finish that and then I'm not sure. It's either to continue on with the field of space research or using my research skills, shift into something about effective animal advocacy, looking at different interventions to help animals. So a little bit undecided about that, but probably something in research for sure.
Wonderful. Well, how can people find out more about your work?
So if people want to see information about the Animal Justice Party, you can see us at animaljusticeparty.org. For me personally, I have a website where I put a lot of my research and work, which is just michaeldello.com.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us for Knowing Animals. And thank you to the audience for joining us for Knowing Animals, a podcast where we talk to animal studies scholars and animal advocates about the work they do for animals. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at knowing_animals, or you can follow me at SO_S. Knowing Animals also has a Facebook page and an Instagram feed. Finally, don't forget to leave a review at iTunes. Reviews make it easier for other people to find us. I'm Siobhan O'Sullivan, and I do like knowing animals.